Hello students, this video is connected to the November 6th remote session on which we are focusing on raster. As a reminder from the previous videos, raster is not about modeling objects, points, lines, or polygons, but rather about modeling space, right? Taking something here like elevation, which wouldn't be attached to a single thing. But rather would be a condition of space. We would understand the elevation here, the elevation there, so on and so forth, and attaching that value. The last couple of videos have really been about showing kind of how this looks in ArcGIS and how it's different. And I want to use this video just to give you some sort of basic skills, basic ones that you might return to that are good to have, so that next week when we learn the 2 or 3 practical applications like density and surface creation, you'll kind of know these basic ones. And they're really going to emulate almost like a select by location, or attribute is the best way to think about it, or a field calculator. That's really what I'm teaching you here. I'm teaching you select by attribute and field calculator, but for raster and not for vector. So these tools will be up here in analysis and tools. And if you come on down in the toolbox to spatial analyst, you'll find something called, spatial analyst is the rasters. The spatial analyst toolbar is all of the raster-based applications that you can learn. And if you were to take that class I was suggesting earlier with Dana Tomlin, you would walk through every single one of these, or the vast majority of them, and learn all the really cool stuff you can do. We're really only going to focus in a few areas. We'll check out density, we'll do a bit on surface, and today we'll do a bit on map algebra. And that's where I want you to go first, is map algebra. And we're going to open something called Raster Calculator. Right, and so raster calculator is effectively the select by attribute or the field calculator, as I was explaining before. So the whole purpose of this tool here is to take values in a raster and turn some on and turn some off so that you create something totally new about the space. Right, so what we have here is elevation. But let's say I knew or needed to know something about that elevation. I needed to know, for example, that maybe areas above 600 feet is what I want to look for. Because if I can find areas above 600 feet, that's going to be ideal for starting a farm or something that I want to do. So I could open up Raster Calculator and I can start to query that. Now, Raster Calculator is going to come out looking sort of like this. And anytime you see a tool that's presented to you with these boxes for you to choose from, my advice is listen to it. It's telling you, I don't like when you type things in. And here's the way that it works. These are the rasters you can process. These are some of the tools you can use to process them. And let's learn some super basic ones. So let's take elevation and say, hey, I want you to bring me back the grid cells where elevation, and let's literally say, is greater than or equal to 600. So right now we are finding all of the grid cells that are greater than 600. Now when you do this, it's going to save your own raster, and I actually want you guys to come in here and click on Browse just to teach you a little tip for saving rasters. Go to Computer, come on into Desktop, create a new item, a new folder. Maybe call it rasters. Or maybe raster output. Come on into raster output. And we'll just put the name here will be, maybe call it RC1, right? Raster Calculator 1. And the the reason I'm having fewer letters here, and I want you to be aware of this, is that Raster doesn't like when there's a lot of different characters. I can't remember the exact number, but it can't save and handle too many characters. So sometimes you want to keep these sort of small from their base name, and then if you need to change the name of it for your visualization purposes, you can do it here in sort of the layer. So come on down here to save. We got RC1. And we'll run it. So elevation is greater than or equal to 600. It's doing its thing, blah, 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 blah. And there you go. Mapping what's not quite there. Suddenly we got something totally new. No longer do we have a grid where every individual cell tells you its exact elevation, but rather something Boolean, something yes or no, 0 and 1. And what do they mean? Well, I can remind myself, right? I could click here where it says 0, maybe click on it. Theoretically, I don't know. Double click? I thought it was going to let me enter a value right here. Used to be able to. So maybe what I'll do is I'll right click on the, or not right click, I'll just click on RC1. Or actually, I'll double click on the color. And then here, where it says the label, right, 0, I'll say 0 equals not above 600 feet. Because that's what that was, right? 0 just meant, hey, I wasn't above 600 feet. But 1, I was above 600 feet. And that's just sort of remind me of what I am, right? 1 equals above 600 feet. And that's the cool thing. This is what Raster Calculator allows you to do. Right now, maybe I want to take land cover, and maybe I want to ask land cover. Maybe let's find just the forest land here. So I'll come in and say, hey, land cover, where you equal. And interestingly enough, when you want to query an equal, it has to be a double. Land cover, where you equal, double equal. And here's the interesting thing, right? This is where that value point comes into play. I can't type forests and shrubland because that's meaningless. But remember that in the attribute table, forest and shrubland was 3. So I'd be saying, hey, bring me back where the forest is the value, which would mean 3. And maybe I'll call that RC2, right? Raster Calculator 2. So it'll run, doing its thing. And it'll come back, and I'll turn off the base land cover. And there we can see, right, 0, all the areas where it's not forest, and green, 1, all the areas where there are forest. And then I can get even, weirder and sort of funkier with it, right? I can come on up here and I can say RC1, and I can say plus RC2, right? So I'll be adding them together, RC1 plus RC2. And think about what's going to happen here, right? It's 0 and 1, and they're going to add up in such a way so that anywhere where there's 2 zeros will be a 0. Anywhere where there's a 0 and a 1, it'll be a 1. And anywhere where both of the criteria are met, those random areas where I'm above 600 feet and where I have forest land cover, that would come back as 2. So maybe if I were creating a suitability grid, right, where 2 is my most suitable land, forests that are above a certain distance, and 1 would be somewhat suitable. I'm either in a forest or I'm above 600 feet. And 0 would be totally unsuitable. Neither of my criteria are met. By adding them together here and letting the different grid cells each populate each other exactly where they are, I map what's not quite there. I create something totally new. I've taken what was a linear surface, the elevation, and what was a nominal surface, the land cover, and I've turned it ordinal, right? Where a value of 0 means pretty good, or is not good, a value of 1 means pretty good, and a value of 2 means best, right? 2 are those forests that are above a certain elevation. 1 are either forests or land above 600 feet, and 0 are areas that meet neither of the criteria. That's Raster Calculator. It's how you query different layers and how you, call out and map things that sort of aren't quite there. And the cool thing is you can do it for multiple ones, right? I could come up here and I could say, hey, actually what I'm looking for was maybe, and you got to put this in parentheses whenever you quote multiple, but I might say, hey, tell me where elevation is greater than or equal to 600, and come on down here and pick and just by the way, this stupid thing, this straight up and down line, that means or. Yeah, it's pretty silly. It's just something you have to learn. But elevation is greater than or equal to 600 feet, and land cover. This time maybe I'll find farmland, right? And land cover double equals 2. You can do that same query that way. You can query multiple different values, and it'll come back with a 0 and a 1. 0 meaning, that I can't, either the elevation's too low, or the land cover is, not farmland, or it'll bring back a value of 1, meaning that both of these criteria were met. And I've mapped what's not quite there. I've sort of cleaned up and categorized the land in totally different ways. Right now I'm looking at farmland that happens to be above 600 feet. So that's Raster Calculator, right? This is the basic tool that you will use frequently when you want to analyze and process rasters. It can effectively be thought of as a select by attribute and a field calculator combined.